Hello, it's your old pal Andrew Whitehouse here, author of the lovely brand new squeaky clean book, Andrew and the Magic Give a Shitometer, Growing Up with ADHD. And I'm here to talk to you today about ADHD and some things you might not know or fully understand about ADHD. And today, I really want to focus on what we call inattention. Now, people with ADHD don't all have inattention. For example, some people have inattention or attention deficit, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Some people have inattention and impulsivity, and some people just have the hyperactivity and impulsivity. So, in actual fact, there's potentially around about a third of people with ADHD, approximately, don't have inattention or an attention deficit. But what is inattention or an attention deficit? Well, inattention or attention deficit is the inability to pay attention to things. Now, a lot of people get really hung up on this because they say, well, if they can't pay attention to things, how do they manage to achieve anything through life? Well, the point of it is that they can pay attention to things that interest them, but not things that don't. For example, I am absolutely obsessed with not liking football. I have no interest in football. Football does absolutely nothing for me. All right? But if you talk to me about football, I am just completely, you'll know that I'm not interested in your football. So you talk to me about football, I can't deal with it. I can't talk about it. I can't have that conversation. My face, my eyes, my facial expression, I might even wander off. But if you talk to me about something that I am interested in, for example, music, then I will be there. I will be there with you, and I can pay attention and I can listen to you. Now, this leads us in quite nicely to attention spans, because my attention span when you're talking to about football is probably a millisecond. But my attention span, if you want to talk to me about soul music or things like that, is pretty long. I can talk to you all day and night about this stuff. I have a friend of mine, and we have conversations about the Beatles across Zoom. They never stop. They never stop. We have phone calls. We have all this stuff. I can just do that. But you want to talk to me about changing electricity supplier? Forget it. So we have what we think is the average attention span of a person with ADHD. And that average attention span is your age plus a minute up to the age of 16, take away a third. Let's have a play with that. So if you are 15 years old, you add a minute, 16 minutes attention span, take a third of that away, you got 10 or 11 minutes. But this is in average situations. In some situations, we have zero attention span. In other situations, we can sit through loads and loads and loads and loads and loads. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but what it is it's a good gauge. So if you're a class teacher and you're wanting to put a lesson on for people with ADHD, age 15 years old, 10 or 11 minutes is going to be pretty good. You're going to be close to being there. So that's the attention span, and it gets lower as they get younger, obviously. So if you're 6 years old, it's your age plus a minute. Take away a third, so that's 7. Knock off about 2 or 3 minutes. A 6-year-old can sit there and listen maybe for 4 minutes. That's something worth thinking about. So that's your attention span, where it meets the attention deficit, or alternatively known as inattention. So what about attention seeking? Attention seeking is an interesting one because actually the terminology attention seeking changed some years ago. And what happened was we changed it to attention needing. Nobody ever warns you they're going to change terminology. You just find out. You read something, you read a paper, or you're at a lecture or something, and you hear, oh, is that what they're calling it now? There's not an email that comes out to us professionals once a month telling us what the new terminology is. But this new terminology, attention needing as opposed to attention seeking, really got me thinking. And I thought to myself, what are the implications of changing these words? So let's start with attention needing. Attention needing could potentially be the child is the youngest child, or she's the youngest child in the family, and the family have just had a new baby. And the new baby has come along, and all of a sudden, old baby is not the baby of the family anymore. It's not the youngest in the family anymore. And so therefore, they've had their place disrupted. It's going to affect their self-esteem and their well-being and all that sort of thing. And so what we have to do there is we have to say, all right, how can we make it better for that person? Because they need a little bit of attention. They need a little bit of TLC. They need a little bit of care, a little bit of love, and we're going to give it to them. So that's what we're going to do with that sort of person, the attention needer. Maybe it's a person who's got difficulties at home. Maybe it's a person that doesn't feel very well. Maybe it's a person who, as I say, has had their place in the family slightly disrupted. Could be anything. But what we know is that they need the attention, and we're going to give them that attention. We're going to make them feel good about that attention. So that's the attention needer. Where does that differ to the attention seeker? I'll tell you. The attention seeker is that person who gets a thrill out of getting attention. So when I was young, it was what we used to call the class clown. And the class clown was that child who always had a witty remark, always had something to say, always making people laugh, quite disruptive usually, and that would be the attention seeker. They would seek out attention in order to fulfill their needs of a joker, of a comedian, or something like that. They might also seek out attention because they want to share the fact that they have a knowledge in something. So they're calling out and they're shouting out and that sort of thing in lessons and learning. Now you can see the difference between the needer and the seeker. The attention needer is more self-esteem, more about well-being, where the attention seeker is more about having themselves being heard because they kind of like it like that and they thrive on that. And so maybe I think I was a little bit like that when I was at school, and maybe that's why I've gone on to present in conferences and things like that. So something worth thinking about. But then when we are seeking or needing attention, is it possible that we're seeking or needing the wrong kind of attention? Okay, any attention is good for me. Bring it on. So when I was a young teacher, I had a teaching assistant who probably had the best behaviour with the children than anyone else I ever knew. And the reason, I spoke to her once. She was a lady called Sue, and I said, Sue, tell me, what's your secret? How do you get that attention, that positive behaviour out of those children so easily? You make it look absolutely effortless. And she said, Andrew, it's quite simple. I praise the good and I ignore the bad. Good and bad. Okay. Or what I would call the right kind of behaviour and the wrong kind of behaviour. And so what she would do, she'd say, oh, you're sitting well, to one of the children, and the rest would sit up really nicely for Sue. And they would do this thing. Nice and easy stuff for her to deal with. By doing this, you are training children that actually your attention seeking or attention needing, whichever it may be, doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. If you're going to be negative, then we're not going to take any notice of that. We're going to move on from that. Not always easy, but it's a good plan if you can do it. So what we're talking about is the right kind of attention and the wrong kind of attention. And it's quite acceptable, I think, to say to a child that it's okay to say, I'm not going to react to your challenging behaviour. I'm only going to react to your positive behaviour. And not only that, I'm going to praise you, I'm going to give you rewards, and I'm going to work with you on your positive behaviour. But your challenging behaviour, I'm not going to respond in any way. You are only going to get the attention you need from the right kind of attention, not the wrong kind of attention. So there we go. Now that moves us quite interestingly into another type of attention difficulty within ADHD, which is attention to detail. Now attention to detail is something that people with ADHD can quite often struggle with. It might be that they've not used their punctuation in their writing. It might be that they've not put the washers in their design technology, so they've got the nut and they've got the bolt, but they forgot to put the washers in. Or it might be that they've not fully read the instructions on something. So attention to detail. And so this is a difficult one for people with ADHD, and I always recommend using things like lists and prompts, little memory prompts, whiteboards, recording equipment. Recording into your telephone is quite a good one. Anything like that that can help you to pay attention to detail and therefore get results out of your projects. So going back to attention spans, I'm going to recommend you, whilst you're on this YouTube channel, I want you to go along and look up on YouTube Andrew Whitehouse, A Few Words About Squirrels and Goldfish, where I talk about having attention spans, and you can have a little watch of this video. It's quite funny. It's only 1 minute and 41 seconds long, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. People with ADHD they often fail to give close attention to detail. So as we said, they can make careless mistakes in activities, and it could be that that you've asked them to do it in a pen and they've done it in a pencil, or you've asked them to write something on a new page and they carried on the back of something else. Or it could be, as we said, more important, and that you've missed something out there. People with ADHD, you might get their attention, but you might find it difficulty to keep their attention. People with ADHD are very easily distracted. Now, I did some work in the London Borough of Sutton with what I'm assuming was a group of non-ADHD adults on a training event. And I was looking out the window, I just happened to look across, and the scraggiest, scruffiest, weather-beaten, tattiest fox I've ever seen walked past. And it walked past the window. And all of these non-ADHD people got up to look at this scrubby old fox and what it was doing. Oh, look, a fox. Oh, look, it's a fox. And they're all looking at the fox. So if they're struggling to pay attention without ADHD, imagine what it's like for people with ADHD. They're very, very easily distracted. And people with ADHD often don't seem to listen when you speak to them directly. That is because they're not listening. In autism, when we say if people look like they're not paying attention, they probably are. They just don't feel the need to make eye contact. In ADHD, it's very different. In ADHD, if they look like they're not paying attention, it's because they're not paying attention. Okay? If they look like they're not listening, it's because they're not listening. So very, very different to autism. Finally, being organised. Being organised, this is linked to the inability to pay attention to detail. Being organised for ADHD people can be very, very tricky. And people with ADHD, they can't organise tasks and activities. So they might start on a DIY job and then realise I've not got all the equipment that I need out of the shed. So I've got everything out except for the screws or the raw plugs or something like that. Often people with ADHD will do anything to avoid the sort of tasks that involve sustained mental effort. They'll do anything to get out of these tasks. And whilst they're doing these tasks, once you do get them up and running, they lose the tools and they lose the equipment that they use, and probably get quite forgetful in those sort of daily activities. So there you go. If we're looking at this, we're saying, okay, the manifestations of attention deficit are inability to pay attention, limited attention spans in many cases, attention seeking, attention needing, seeking or needing the right or the wrong kind of attention, and attention to detail. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to buy my book. It's Andrew and the Magic Give-A-Shitometer, Growing Up with ADHD by Andrew Whitehouse. It's available on Kindle and it's available on paperback on Amazon. It's been lovely talking to you this morning. I'll speak to you again soon.